In the kingdom of Erden, people loved telling stories about heroes, but almost never about those who lived too quietly to find their way into someone's song. People like Ren. He was not the son of a nobleman, not the apprentice of a great master, not a gifted mage, and did not even possess that stubborn, fierce talent that sometimes awakens in the poor and pushes them upward against all odds. He had only one misfortune that had followed him since childhood like a shadow. Ren did poorly at school. Not because he was stupid, he understood everything but too slowly, too late, too uncertainly. The teachers became irritated, his classmates laughed, and his parents, when they were still alive, only sighed heavily and said that he needed to try harder. He tried. It changed nothing. Then there was the academy. Ren entered it not because of a calling, but at the insistence of his old uncle, who believed that anyone can be taught. The academy turned out to be a place where every talent was immediately visible. Future sorcerers, swordsmen, alchemists, and commanders reigned there, and beside them Ren looked not merely weak, but almost unnecessary. He failed everything that could be failed and left it without glory, without connections, and without hope. Then came years of small jobs: porter, copyist, shop apprentice, forge assistant, warehouse guard, ditch cleaner. Everywhere he was almost suitable, not quite right, too slow. And eventually fate drove him to the place where it most often hid failures, the market of the capital. Ren sold apples. Not because he loved fruit, because apples were cheap, they could be bought from village farms at the morning price and resold in the city for a small profit. He lived on the upper floor of the old tavern, the Drunken Binding, where the rooms were cramped and the walls let in the winter cold and other people's conversations. After a long day at the market, he went up to his room, lay down on the bed with its thin mattress, and thought that this was probably how his entire life would pass. Without greatness, without love, without a turning point that would change anything. He was wrong. That evening, Ren returned from the market, dropped the heavy bag of unsold apples by the door, and collapsed onto the bed without undressing. Rain roared outside the window, drops struck the roof boards, and the voices of drunken tavern patrons rose from below. He stared at the ceiling and thought about how he had once again earned less than he had expected. Again, it would only be enough for food, the room, and a little salt for the week ahead. "Looks like," he muttered under his breath, "I will die without ever becoming anyone." And at that moment, the air in the room changed. At first, Ren thought it was the wind. Then he realized that no wind could thicken like that in the middle of a room, as though the world had suddenly moved apart. Directly in front of his bed, a round portal opened. Not bright, not loud, but strangely quiet, like a wound in space. A soft, silvery light ran along its edges, while inside swirled a depth resembling a starless night sky. Ren sat up with a jerk. The portal slowly expanded, and from it, with a wet rustle as though emerging from water, a human hand reached out. But it was not entirely human. The fingers were too long, and the wrist glowed with a delicate pattern of symbols. The hand froze in the air as though searching for something. Ren did not breathe. He had heard of the gates. How could he not have? Legends circulated throughout the world about people before whom portals of trials opened. It was said that if a person was worthy, the gates would grant them power. Not an artifact, not an amulet. A true gift that grows into the soul and changes the very nature of its owner. People with such a gift were called the Chosen, and they almost always entered the elite of the world. But that happened somewhere far away. To heroes, to saints, to future commanders. Not to him. The hand in the portal opened its palm, and within it lay a glowing symbol. Not an object, but rather a condensed form composed of silvery energy. The voice sounded without words directly inside Ren's head, and he could not have said whether it was female, male, or belonged to something else entirely. Worthy? Ren swallowed. "I do not know." A pause. "Come closer." He should have been more frightened. He should have jumped up, run out of the room, called the innkeeper, the guards, anyone. But instead, he slowly extended his hand. Something deep within his soul, that same stubborn and senseless thing that had kept him from dying in poverty and humiliation, suddenly whispered, "If this is a chance, you no longer have the right not to take it." His fingers touched the light. Energy surged into his body instantly. The pain was not severe. It was more alien. Ren felt a cold spark run through his veins, and then it was as though a door had been flung open inside his head into a room where dozens of incomprehensible images had previously been sleeping. The portal disappeared as suddenly as it had appeared, and the hand withdrew back into the void and dissolved along with it. Ren fell onto his side, gasping for breath. The room was silent. "What was that?" he whispered, clutching his chest. And then the voice spoke again, the same and yet different, as though the speaker was reflected simultaneously in his thoughts and in something deeper. Skill acquired. Ren froze. Hybrid combination. The ability to unite two or more forms of power, properties, phenomena, or skills into a single new expression. Enhancement, weakening, distortion, conflict, or synthesis at the bearer's discretion. The greater the understanding of the structure, the more complex and precise the combination. An error causes overload, recoil, and unpredictable consequences. Ren slowly sat up. What does hybrid combination mean? The answer came immediately, as though the voice had only been waiting for the question. You can mix the incompatible. Water and fire, steel and wind, blade and shadow. Someone else's skill and your own. Create enhancement, distortion, a trap, a reverse effect. The bearer decides what the result will be. Ren remained silent for a long time. Then he laughed quietly, not from joy but from shock. This is too dangerous. Yes, and too complicated. Yes, and if I make a mistake, people could get hurt. Ren lowered his head. Images flashed through his mind. He accidentally mixed someone's jump with another person's attack, and they broke their legs. Or he combined a defensive seal with a stream of foreign magic, and it collapsed, exploding in its owner's face. He swallowed. Why me? This time the voice did not answer immediately. Because the door chose you. And everything disappeared. Ren sat in his cheap room, listening to the rain, and for the first time in his life understood that his life could no longer remain the same. In the morning, he had barely slept before dawn. Again and again, he recalled the voice, the portal, the hand, the glowing form of the skill. At the market, he moved as though in a dream, arranging apples on the stall while merchants shouted, customers argued, and coins jingled around him. But the world had changed. Ren began noticing oddities that he had previously simply overlooked. One customer had an overly even, foreign gait, like someone with the combat skill. Around another woman's fingers were fine droplets of water that vanished before they could become noticeable. A guard at the gate had a barely visible outline of power around his shoulders and back. He did not understand exactly how it worked, but the feeling was undeniable. He could distinguish the very structure of power. Not completely, not precisely, but enough to understand where there was a skill and where there was only a mask. By evening, he decided to test himself for the first time. In the tavern's back courtyard stood an old barrel of water, and nearby lay a rusty iron rod that had once been used to support carts. Ren looked at them, extended his hand, and tried to mix one with the other. He did not know what to call it, and did not even know exactly what he wanted to obtain. But something inside him responded. The water trembled. A dense, thin film resembling a metallic sheen appeared on its surface. Ren recoiled. Did it work? The film trembled and disappeared. He tried again, and this time the barrel cracked, and water poured onto the ground as though he had brought incompatible properties together too abruptly. Dangerous, he told himself grimly. Very dangerous. And at that very moment, he understood the most important thing. If he did not learn to control his new gift, he would be dangerous not only to his enemies. To anyone who happened to be nearby, 3 days after receiving the power, someone tried to test him for the first time. It happened late in the evening when Ren was already returning to the tavern after selling the last batch of apples. The narrow street was almost empty. The lamps burned dimly. Dogs barked somewhere in the distance. And then 3 people blocked his path. They wore simple cloaks but moved too cohesively to be ordinary street robbers. Are you Ren? One of them asked. And who are you? Silence answered him. Then one of them stepped forward and abruptly swung a stick, aiming for his head. Ren recoiled, and at that same instant, his new gift activated on its own. He saw the movement and understood. If he mixed the trajectory of the strike with his own step backward, his body would leave the strike zone not merely by instinct, but according to a new logic. He jerked to the side. The stick passed by. The second attacker lunged forward with a knife. In panic, Ren tried to connect the other man's attack with his own breathing, and suddenly the knife trembled as though its weight had changed. The attacker froze halfway through a step, surprised, and that was enough. Ren grabbed a stone from the ground and struck his hand with it. The third man, seeing this, swore. It is him. He really does have the reaction. Reaction? Ren did not understand, but there was no time to figure it out. A fourth person emerged from the shadows. He was taller than the others and wore a black mask with thin cracks. His voice was muffled. Do not touch him. We need him alive. Ren went cold. Who are you? The mask turned toward him. Those who seek a new world. And the people in cloaks retreated as though they had received an order. That was when Ren first understood. His power was not an accidental luxury. People were already hunting those like him. The next day, he did not go to the market. Too many thoughts, too much fear, too many questions. Instead, he sat by the tavern window and tried to put everything in order. A new world, the man in the mask had said. Needed alive. And also a new world. Who needed him? The answer came from a conversation between two customers downstairs in the common hall. Ren did not intend to eavesdrop, but the name they mentioned made him alert. One of the saints has appeared in the west again, one of them said. Already the third this year, they say the city council itself bows before him. Ren knew about the 7 saints. The world had legendary wielders of the power of the gates, who had reached such a level that they were recognized not merely as the strongest, but as the pillars of civilization. They stood at the summit. They protected kingdoms, suppressed monsters, and decided wars through their presence alone. The 7 saints were not so much a title as a sign that the world was still holding together. And if he had been noticed by people who sought a new world, then his power was somehow connected to that level. Ren unconsciously clenched his hands. Could he truly reach that place? The elite of the world? The circle of saints? The thought seemed ridiculous, but those were exactly the kinds of thoughts that usually occurred to people whose lives were about to split in two. He tested his gift at night when the tavern was asleep. At first on small things. He mixed water and heat to create steam, stone and vibration to send a small, trembling wave through the floorboards, shadow and light to pull a soft strip of gloom from the corner of the room. Gradually, he began to understand the logic. The power of the gates did not allow him simply to stitch things together. It allowed him to see the hidden possibility of combination. Sometimes it led to enhancement, sometimes to distortion, sometimes to destruction. He decided to test it on himself. Ren touched his own palm, mixed the internal tension of his muscles with the impulse of his breathing, and almost immediately felt his body become lighter. He was not flying, but for a moment it was as though his weight had decreased. He took a step, and the floorboard beneath his foot did not creak. He took a second and did not sway. So that is how it works. And then he understood another terrifying thing. If he mixed someone else's skill with another person's, the effect could become many times more powerful than the original. That meant he was capable not only of enhancing, he was capable of destroying the balance of another person's power. That could make him monstrously dangerous. He froze. There was a knock at the door. "Ren?" the tavern owner called softly. "Someone has come to see you." He tensed, hurriedly removed all traces of his training, and opened the door. An unfamiliar young woman in a traveling cloak stood on the threshold. Around her neck hung the symbol of the gates, a silver circle with a slit in the center. "Are you the one touched by the portal?" she asked without introduction. Ren did not answer immediately. "Who are you?" She smiled, not very warmly. "My name is Leia. I work for those commonly called the Observers of the Gates, and I have come to tell you that if you do not want to die, you will have to come with me." Leia turned out to be more than a messenger. She knew too much about the gates and spoke with such confidence that it seemed as though she had already seen Ren in her calculations. Usually, she said as they went outside, the gates choose people with an already developed talent structure, mages, warriors, rare craftsmen, but sometimes they choose those who know how to do nothing. That is the worst and best possibility at the same time. Why the worst? Because such people have no ready-made framework, and the power may tear them apart. And the best? Leia looked at him and softened slightly for the first time, because they have not yet been filled with other people's limitations. She took him to a small house behind the city warehouses where 2 men and 1 elderly woman were already waiting. They did not call themselves an order and wore no uniform, but maps of the kingdom marked with points and lines lay on the table before them. "This is a network of observers," Leia explained. "We watch for gate surges and where the power goes." In this world, the gates do not merely grant skills. They respond to the balance of the world. Ren sat down cautiously. "And why do you need me?" The elderly woman leaned forward. "Because the last time the gates chose a hybrid skill of this type, the world nearly broke apart." They explained for a long time, dryly, without unnecessary poetry, as though discussing a dangerous weapon. Hybrid combination was the rarest type of gate gift. Not an element, not an elemental force, not a traditional combat skill. It was the ability to combine features of skills, properties of objects, effects of conditions, rhythms of movement, and even behavioral patterns. "So," Ren said slowly, "I can combine, for example, a swordsman and water magic?" "If you understand the structure of both skills," Leia replied. "And what will happen, that depends on you. Enhancement, weakening, a new property, a reverse effect, a disruption of control, anything at all." Ren was silent for a moment. "This sounds like madness." "It is," one of the men calmly replied, "and that is exactly why such wielders either become the elite of the world or the cause of a catastrophe." It was said without threat, but Ren understood the main point. His gift was not merely rare, it was a potential risk to everyone. What if I make a mistake? You will make a mistake and the effect may strike you or those around you. That is why you are required to learn control. Leia stood up. But there is another problem. While you are weak and untrained, your gift will attract people who want to use it for their own purposes. "The ones in masks?" Ren asked. Leia looked directly at him. "Yes, they are the White Wasteland. A group convinced that the current world has rotted. They believe that the gates chose weak and deceitful rulers, and they want to destroy the existing order to build a new one on the ruins of the old." Ren froze. They kill for an idea? They consider it purification. Ren was not asked whether he wanted to join, because the choice had already been made by the portal, and the people from the Observer Network believed that once the gates had opened, he would no longer be able to return to an ordinary life. The training began with small things. They gave him a basic chamber, a stone hall where he had to practice on simple objects: water, wood, metal, cloth. The task was not to create a miracle, but to understand the principle. Leia taught him to sense incompatibility. If excessively different things were mixed without a common foundation, the effect would break free with an error. If a bridge was found, the result would be stable. Ren sat for hours before two objects and tried to grasp exactly where their similarity lay. It was agonizing. It was as though he were learning to look at the world all over again. Wood and moisture, metal and hardness, fire and movement, cloth and stretching. Then Leia brought him a training skill, a seal of short acceleration used by the city guards. It was a simple classic technique, merely a short dash, and Ren had to understand how it worked. "Do not look at the effect," Leia said. "Look at the structure." Ren watched for a long time, and suddenly he saw it. The rhythm of tension in the muscles, the strike against the ground, the transfer of momentum, a short delay. He inhaled and tried to mix the acceleration with his own intuition. It worked poorly, throwing him into the wall. But he understood the main point. If he added soft compensation for the angle to the dash, the movement would become more stable. The second time, he flew farther and did not fall. Leia nodded. "Better already." "This is all too complicated," Ren groaned, rubbing his shoulder. The power of the gates is not for the lazy. While he trained, the White Wasteland began acting openly. First, a caravan carrying food disappeared. Then a fire broke out at night in the northern district, and the firefighters swore that they had seen people in white masks whom the flames did not touch. Then the guards found one of the officials responsible for distributing weapons among the garrisons dead. People whispered about a conspiracy. The Observer Network could no longer remain silent. Ren saw them at work for the first time. He and Leia were urgently taken to the roof of one of the warehouses, where several operatives had already gathered. Below, in the square, a group of masked people was moving. "Is that them?" Ren asked. "Yes," Leia replied, "and today we will have to test what your gift can do in battle." Ren's mouth went dry. "Wait, I still barely know how to use it." "Too late," she said. "They have already found you." The battle began suddenly. The masks moved quickly, but not like ordinary bandits. One of them clearly possessed a skill of gliding across surfaces, another controlled sharp impulses of air, and a third created blinding flashes. Ren realized in horror they also used the gates. The first enemy rushed up the warehouse wall. Leia knocked him down with a magical slash. The second hurled an airstrike at them, and without thinking, Ren tried to combine it with his own breathing. The world trembled. The flow of air did not merely fly aside, it curled into a narrow channel and struck back, knocking the attacker off his feet. "Good!" Leia shouted. "You did it! I did not know what I was doing. That is how it should be. Feel the structure." Ren barely managed to dodge the third masked man who rushed into close combat. He had a strange skill. He increased the weight of his body at the moment of impact. Ren saw it in real time and understood that he could combine the heaviness of the strike with his own clumsy but quick evasiveness. He stepped aside and the opponent missed, striking the wall. The stones cracked. Ren gasped for breath. He understood. Without outside help, he would already have been killed. But he understood something else as well. For the first time in his life, he was truly influencing a battle. It was frightening and exhilarating. While they finished off the first attackers, a man in a long white cloak appeared on the roof of the neighboring building. His mask was not cracked but whole, with a symbol resembling an inverted door. "Enough," he said. "We did not come for you." Leia tensed. "Leave, Elar." Ren looked at her. "You know each other?" "Unfortunately, yes." Elar raised his hand and a strange light hummed around him. Ren immediately understood. This was not a combat skill in the usual sense. It was a class and a very dangerous one. Something like suppression of skill structures. "The White Wasteland does not hunt random people," he said. "We seek those whom the gates consider anomalies. And you, Ren, are exactly that." Ren clenched his fists. "And what do you want?" Elar slowly smiled beneath the mask. "The world is already dead in its current form. We simply want it to die properly." It sounded calm, almost holy. And that was exactly why it was frightening. Leia swore. "He is one of the leaders." "Not only that," Elar replied. "I am one of those who saw how the Saints lie to the world." Ren did not understand all the words, but he understood the main point. This organization was not merely composed of terrorists. They believed they were right, and such enemies were always more dangerous than ordinary killers. Elar did not remain for long. He left behind a short wave of suppression that instantly disabled two of the observers' magical amulets. Then he disappeared as calmly as he had appeared. After the battle, Leia remained silent for a long time. "What did he mean?" Ren finally asked. "About the Saints." Leia looked at him wearily. "Not everything in the gate system is transparent. The seven Saints keep the world afloat. But there are things they are not told, even by those who stand above ordinary observers. The White Wasteland hunts not only power, they hunt lies." Ren sat on the edge of the steps. "And why is all of this happening to me?" Leia sat beside him. "Because your gift can disrupt the connection between skills. And if the White Wasteland obtains you, they will be able to break not only people, they will be able to break the very structure of the world." He remained silent. Then she added more quietly, "And that is why they will either protect you or try to take you. In this world, there are almost no neutral options." A week later, Ren was invited to the Capitol Hall of the Observers. He trembled with tension as he was led down a long marble corridor decorated with stained glass images of the gates and legendary wielders of power. At the end of the hall stood a man who radiated such a powerful sense of structure that Ren involuntarily lowered his gaze. It was one of the seven saints, tall, gray-haired, with a calm face and clear eyes. His name was Saint Laurent. He wore no crown and had no pompous entourage, only a light cloak and a slender staff. "You are the one," he said calmly. Ren swallowed. "I suppose." Lauren smirked. "Your words, by the way, sound very truthful. Usually the self-confident lie better." Leia bowed. Ren copied her movement too late and far too awkwardly. The saint came closer. His gaze did not press down on him, but studied him. Hybrid combination. A very rare and dangerous gift. "Do you understand what it does?" "Partially," Ren admitted. "Good. Then I will tell you directly. If you learn to control it, you will be able to become the key to containing certain catastrophic skills. If you do not learn, you yourself will become such a catastrophe." Ren turned pale. "Thank you for being direct." Lauren nodded. In our work, it is better not to waste time on false politeness. The White Wasteland is already moving toward the capital. And if they reach your gift before we do, the world will be in serious trouble. And so, without any preparation, Ren found himself drawn into a conflict that was far greater than his own impoverished life. Training under the observers turned out to be different, harsh, systematic. He was no longer taught only how to mix. Now Ren was made to understand what he had to know. How to recognize another person's skill structure, how to determine compatibility, how to set a limiter so as not to destroy the body, how to avoid overload during powerful combinations, how to read a combat situation before the strike. It was there that he first met other powerful gate wielders, not saints, but those who stood on the edge of the elite. One controlled steel through vibration. Another could bind wounds and pain together in an instant. A third created mirrored outlines of protection. Ren felt painfully out of place among them. But one day, one of them, a young man named Merrick, threw him a brief phrase after training. "You are no worse. You are simply not fully assembled yet." That struck Ren harder than any insult, because it was not humiliation, but the truth. The White Wasteland struck the capital at the worst possible moment. At night, during a public gathering of the observers, several city towers began losing magical stability at once. The internal resonators malfunctioned, and panicked rumors spread through the streets. Ren, Leia, and several operatives found themselves at the center of the evacuation. Elar appeared again, no longer hiding. "We are not your enemies," he shouted from the square. "We simply want this world to stop rotting." "You call murder purification," Leia shouted, "and you call stagnation stability." Ren stood and watched him, feeling the gift inside him respond with an anxious vibration. He could see Elar also used the gates, and his power was based on breaking connections. If he struck the resonance center, the towers could collapse. "Ren," Leia shouted, "we need a hybrid recoil. If you can combine suppression and stabilization, you can hold the magical line." "I do not know how." "Then improvise." Ren's heart pounded in his throat, and he did something he would never have done before. He took three things: the vibration of the resonator, his own breathing, the rhythm of the observer's supporting seal, and tried to bind them into a single core. The world trembled. Then the air around the central tower moved in thin waves like water over stone. The tower did not collapse. Ren dropped to one knee, feeling his hands tremble, but he held it. It was his first real contribution to saving the city. After the attack, Ren was summoned to St. Laurent. After listening to the details, he remained silent for a long time, then suddenly said, "You are lucky you did not explode." "That is reassuring," Ren replied dryly. Lauren smiled. "I am not joking. The gift of hybrid combination has an unpleasant limit. The more complex the mixture, the stronger the backlash. You can become incredibly dangerous, but every wrong decision will be paid for by your body." Ren looked at his palms. "So I really am still weak." "No," the saint replied. "You simply do not yet know how to be strong safely. That is much more difficult." Ren remembered those words. Because he finally understood, the elite of the world are not those who simply possess great power. They are those who know how not to destroy the world along with their power. After the events in the capital, the White Wasteland finally declared itself an enemy of the current order. They began a series of attacks on warehouses, caravans, and small border settlements. Their goal was not merely pressure, they created chaos, proving that the kingdoms and the saints could not protect the people. Ren saw the consequences for the first time in a village on the eastern border. Burned houses, frightened children, empty wells, and that sight became a point of no return for him. It was no longer only about his room, the market, and an accidental fate. Now he saw that if the White Wasteland won, everything he knew would perish. "Is this their new world?" he asked Leia, standing among the ruins of the devastated village. "Yes," she replied. "First they break the old one. Then they offer the only correct order." Ren clenched his teeth. "Then I will not let them go." Leia looked at him carefully. "Now you are beginning to sound like someone who could enter the circle of the Seven Saints." The path to the elite of the world was not beautiful. It was long, dirty, and dangerous. Ren did not become strong instantly. He learned through mistakes, injuries, and sleepless nights. Little by little, his gift began to reveal itself not as chaos, but as a language. He learned to combine protection and slowing into a temporary barrier, to mix the impulse of a dash with someone else's sword technique, to turn a simple water weave into a sticky trap, and, most importantly, to feel when a combination was already on the verge of destruction. Not everyone respected him. Some were afraid, some were jealous. Some among the observers openly called him unstable, but no one called him merely a failure anymore. One evening, St. Laurent met him again on the training ground. "Do you still want to become stronger?" he asked. Ren looked at his wounded palm, at the dark horizon beyond the walls of the capital, at the lights where the white wasteland might be hiding. "I want people to have a world where they are not broken for the sake of someone else's idea." Laurent nodded. "Good. Then remember, sainthood is not light. It is the ability to bear the weight of the world and not use it as a reason for pride." Ren did not answer, but inside he understood. He had just taken the first step toward a place where people were no longer divided into useful and useless. By the time the white wasteland reached the inner lands, Ren was no longer the man who had lain on a sagging bed in the tavern and thought that his life was meaningless. He still doubted himself, still made mistakes, still sometimes felt out of place among the strongest. But now he knew how to do something else. He knew how to withstand another person's power, understand it, restructure it, and direct it where it could save rather than destroy. The observers began assembling a unit. The saints prepared to set out, and Ren, whom the world had barely noticed not long ago, found himself at the center of a decision upon which the future fate of the kingdom depended. Leia, passing him before lights out, quietly said, "You do understand that everything is only beginning?" Ren looked at the night sky. "Yes. And are you not afraid?" He thought about his former life. Apples, the tavern, poverty, empty hopes. Then about the portal, the hand, the power, the white wasteland, and the 7 saints. "I am afraid," he said honestly. "But now I at least have something worth fighting for." That day, Ren received an unsigned letter for the first time. It lay on his desk in the room assigned to him in the observer's house and looked far too simple to be safe. The paper was thick with a barely visible silvery thread along the edge. There was no name, crest, or official mark on the envelope. Only one phrase, written in a neat, almost indifferent hand. "If you want to understand who is already coming after you, come to the old northern watchtower after sunset." Ren simply sat and stared at the letter for several minutes. Everything inside him became tense at once. The gift connected to the gates responded not with alarm, but with a strange, cold attention, as though a fragment of the world had tensed and begun tracking possible outcomes. Leia, seeing his face, snatched the letter and quickly read it. "No," she said at once. "Do not even think about going alone. And if this is the only way to learn who is there, then you will learn it together with me and a pair of fighters." Ren wanted to object, but deep down he understood. Leia was right. The fact that someone had left him a letter meant more than simple interest. It was a test, or a trap, or an invitation to the first real conversation with someone who knew far too much. And yet he felt that if he refused, he would forever remain someone who was simply afraid of his own path. So he nodded. "All right, but if this is a trap, I want to be the first to see the face of the person who said it." The watchtower stood on an old hill beyond the capital walls, where the outer patrol had once begun before the city expanded. Almost no one went there now. The stairs were cracked, the stone weathered, and dry bushes and wild ivy grew all around. The place seemed forgotten, but Ren already knew. Forgotten did not mean empty. 3 of them came. Ren, Leia, and one of the Saint observers named Merrick, the same man who had once said that he was not fully assembled yet. Merrick walked ahead, checking every flight of stairs while Leia stayed slightly behind, never taking her eyes off the roofs and windows of the neighboring buildings. "Too quiet," Merrick muttered. "Because they are already waiting for us," Ren replied. His gift responded with a faint inner impulse. He could feel there was not one power here, but several. Different ones. Layer upon layer, and among them, one especially wrong, like a warped note in a perfectly performed melody. 2 people were waiting for them on the upper platform of the tower. The first wore a white cloak and a mask covering the lower half of his face. The second was a woman without a mask, dressed in a plain gray suit, with short-cropped hair and the eyes of someone accustomed to making decisions without asking permission from her conscience. Ren stopped. "Which of you wrote the letter?" The woman raised her hand. "I did. My name is Sarah. I am neither from the White Wasteland nor from the Observers." Leia tensed. "Then who are you?" Sarah looked at her coldly. One of those who knows that your order is already cracking, and your saint here can feel it too. Merrick did not answer. He simply watched the white-masked man, and Ren noticed the light of a combat skill slowly appearing on his fingers. "Speak," Merrick said. Sarah nodded toward Ren. "Your gift is not unique by accident. The gates have chosen similar bearers before, and every time it ended the same way. Either they were absorbed by the structures of the saints, or a hunt began for them." Ren clenched his teeth. "And why are you telling me this?" Sarah smiled without warmth. "Because the White Wasteland began hunting earlier than you thought, and one of the people you consider an ally is already passing information to them." Leia stepped forward sharply. "Name them." "Not here," Sarah replied calmly. "First, I must make sure that you are capable of enduring the truth." Ren felt irritation rising inside him. "I am tired of tests." "Then you will not like the next part of the conversation," Sarah said. "The White Wasteland is not preparing an attack. They are preparing an event, a large one. And when it begins, thousands will die in the capital." Merrick stepped forward so sharply that the air between him and the white-masked fighter trembled. "If you have information, speak." The white-masked man finally spoke in a low, calm voice. "When the world is built on lies, those who guard it call the truth a threat." "You did not answer," Leia cut him off. Ren watched Sarah and felt her power trembling almost imperceptibly. Not weakness, more like restrained tension. "I know the names," she said, "but I will not reveal them until you, Ren, show that you are capable not only of mixing skills, but also of enduring the consequences of your decisions." "This is another test," he said wearily. "Yes," Sarah replied. Ren suddenly realized how absurd everything that was happening had become. He had been a young man who could barely make ends meet, and now he stood on an ancient tower listening to people talk about the deaths of thousands and traitors among those who were supposed to protect the world. And yet he did not laugh, because he could feel they were not lying, not completely. Sarah held out a small crystal in which white, almost smoky energy shimmered. "This is a fragment of a suppressed gate imprint. Use your gift on it." Leia turned sharply toward Ren. "Do not touch it." "Why?" "Because no one knows what it will do." "Exactly," Sarah said. "That is why you should touch it." Ren slowly took the crystal. The moment his fingers touched it, the gift inside him activated on its own. Possibilities flashed before his eyes. Stabilize the energy, split it, enhance it, distort it, bind it to the body, release it into space. Ren swallowed. "What do you want from me?" "To understand whether you can use the White Wasteland against itself," Sarah said. He closed his eyes, and for the first time he decided not to copy, not to repeat, and not to experiment at random. He began listening to the structure of the fragment. Inside the crystal was a foreign logic: suppression, separation, emptiness, destruction of connections. It was almost like an anti-power. Ren tried to combine it with his own breathing to soften the destruction. But the gift went further. It found not merely weakening, but an inverse property. The emptiness began drawing excess resonance into itself. A sharp, cold wind rose in the tower. The crystal in his palm flared and became transparent for a second, then released a thin wave that spread across the platform in a circle. Merrick took a step back. "What was that?" Ren opened his eyes. His fingers were trembling. "I think I understand how to use it." Sarah looked at him carefully. "Not merely use it. Turn it against its source." "Good." Leia frowned. "This is dangerous." "Of course," Sarah replied. "But right now, that is exactly the kind of person we need." After the demonstration, Sarah finally revealed a part of the truth. Not everything, but enough to make the world around Ren even more complicated. The White Wasteland really was preparing a major strike. Not against the walls of the capital, but against the system of gate supports built into the old temples and towers. Their goal was not merely destruction. They wanted to free the power from its current guardians and rebuild the world around a new order without hereditary titles, without saints, without observers, without familiar laws. "They believe the world has become stagnant," Sarah said, "and that the only way to save the future is to destroy the current hierarchy." "By killing people?" Ren asked. "Yes." "Then that is not salvation, but fanaticism." Sarah held his gaze. "I am not defending them. I am only explaining that they do not consider themselves evil." It was unpleasantly honest. Leia was clearly restraining herself. "And who is their leader?" Sarah remained silent for a moment, a man who was once himself close to the circle of the Seven Saints. Ren froze. Wait, you mean, yes? Sarah said. Their leader used to be part of the system he now wants to destroy. St. Lorne was not surprised when they returned and told him about the meeting. He merely stared into the distance for a long time, then wearily lowered himself into a chair. So he is still alive, he said. Leia straightened sharply. You know him? I knew a man named Arct, Lauren said. Once he was one of the most promising bearers of a gate gift. Very intelligent, very charismatic, and far too convinced of his own righteousness. And what happened to him? Ren asked. Lauren gave a grim smile. He came to the conclusion that the Saints did not save the world, but merely prevented it from changing. And one day, he simply disappeared. After that, he was presumed dead. Ren looked at him. And now he leads the White Wasteland? It appears so. It explained much and made almost nothing easier. Ren sat in the chair and felt a heavy understanding growing inside him. He had become involved in a conflict where the enemy was not merely strong. He was ideologically convinced of his own righteousness. And such people were usually ready to burn everything, including themselves, for the sake of a new order. 2 days later, their worst fears were confirmed. One of the old gate towers on the southern road sent an alarm signal. Ren, Leia, Merrick, and several other fighters were sent there immediately. The tower stood among the hills, and by the time they reached it, the air around it was already distorted. The walls glowed with white cracks, and the protective symbols on the stone crumbled like sand. They are already inside, Merrick said. Ren looked up at the stairs and balconies of the tower, and felt that sickeningly familiar pressure, the emptiness that drew support out of every structure. The White Wasteland had struck the gate system not through destruction, but by severing the connection. If the tower fell, the entire surrounding region would suffer. I need access to the top, Ren said. No, Leia cut him off. You are not ready for full resonance yet, and if we do not go now, the tower will collapse, and you may collapse with it. Ren looked at her. Then try to catch me. And he ran. It was worse inside than outside. Debris lay across every landing, and white lines along the walls seemed to devour the ancient magic. On the second floor, Ren saw people in white masks. They were not fighting the guards, they were breaking the ritual anchors. One of them turned around. There he is. Ren felt the choice spinning frantically inside him. Combine acceleration and protection, unite the density of the air and the stability of the body, or take the risk and try to turn suppression against the source of suppression. He chose the last option. Too dangerous. Precisely why it was effective. Ren caught the structure of the white rupture and mixed it with his own breathing. For a moment, it seemed as though his chest would tear apart from within. But then he felt it. The emptiness, instead of pulling the support out of the tower, began drawing in the excess destructive energy and draining it into his improvised combination. The tower shuddered. It did not collapse. One of the masked figures stepped back. Impossible. Ren could barely stand but continued moving. Gate skills worked around him like keys and locks, and for the first time, he consciously turned destruction into stabilization. Inside, on the highest level, stood a ritual node. At its center was a crystal that had almost gone dark. Ren saw a new seal being placed over it to complete the destruction, and then the strike came. A man in a dark cloak, arced, flew in from the side. His face was uncovered, and Ren saw the gaze of someone who had long ago decided that the world had to be rewritten. So this is what you are like, Arct said. The bearer who can mix everything indiscriminately. Ren clenched his teeth. You knew I would come? Yes. And I hoped you would see that the current world can no longer be saved. Ren did not attack immediately. That surprised even him. Arct stood opposite him, and there was no madness in his voice, only certainty. Why destroy the tower, Ren asked. To eliminate the monopoly, the gates choose only a few. The Saints secure their power. The observers watch but do not change anything. The world has become stagnant because the powerful are afraid of losing control. And that is why you kill people? Arct shrugged. A transition is never clean. Something must disappear for something new to emerge. Ren felt anger boiling in his chest. You call it necessity, I call it honesty. Leia burst onto the upper level at the same moment that Merrick and the others held back the masked fighters below. Step away from him, she shouted. Arct did not even look at her. Leia. Do you still believe the saints will save the world? She clenched her teeth. I believe you need to be stopped. Arct smirked. Then you need this boy. Without him, you will not be able to repair what I break. Ren understood the main point. The White Wasteland needed him not only as a dangerous opponent. His hybrid combination was capable of both repairing and breaking, and that meant whoever controlled him would gain the advantage in the new era. This was not merely a battle, it was an argument about the future of the world. Arc struck first. His power was not an attack in the usual sense, but the tearing out of internal cohesion. Ren felt his vision tremble and his thoughts fall apart. If he had not managed to catch Leia's protective rhythm, he would already have been thrown down. Leia shouted, "Do not try to repeat him completely, you will break." Ren understood that even without her, but he saw something else as well. If he combined a partial diversion of the rupture with reinforced support of the crystal, he could not merely save the tower, but redirect part of the energy back into the ritual node. It was a risk, almost suicidal. And yet he decided to take it, because there were people behind him. Because if he retreated now, the White Wasteland would gain proof that it was right. Because he no longer wanted to be the one who was always almost in time. Ren directed his gift, combining the incompatible, collapsed suppression and stable protection, a severed connection and a stabilizing thread. His own fear and someone else's magic. Light flared inside the tower. Arc took a step back for the first time during the entire battle. Now that is interesting, he said quietly. The ritual node cracked, then contracted, then released a wave of white heat into the ceiling, and the tower stopped dying. When everything ended, Ren was on his knees, barely breathing. His hands trembled. His head rang as though something inside had cracked. Leia reached him first and helped keep him from falling face first onto the stone. "You idiot," she breathed. "Thank you," he replied with difficulty. Merrick came up to them later, covered in dust and blood, but alive. "The tower held," he said. Ren slowly raised his head. So it worked. Leia looked at him not as a novice, not as a problem, but as someone who had just proved that he could change the outcome of a battle. "Yes," she said quietly. "It worked, but the victory was incomplete. Arc escaped. The masked figures disappeared into the hills, and most importantly, Ren now knew that the White Wasteland would seek him not merely as a threat, but as a possible tool. And that understanding became a new burden on his shoulders. After the incident, the tower became a place of honor and anxiety at the same time. Ren was congratulated, patted on the shoulder, and thanked. But he could not fully rejoice in it. He saw how fragile the entire order had proven to be. One well-prepared strike would be enough to destroy much more. St. Lauren came to him in the evening. "You made the right choice," he said. Ren gave a tired smile. At that moment, it seemed like a very bad one. "Usually the right decisions look bad," Lauren replied, "because they require payment in advance." Ren looked at his palms. "I still do not understand where my limit is." Lauren shook his head. "And that is good. A limit is not something you should search for too early. First learn to build a foundation. Otherwise you will not even make it halfway to sainthood." Ren looked at him. "Do you truly think I can become one of the 7 saints?" Lauren remained silent for a long time. "If the world does not break first, yes. And considering who is coming after you now, you will have to learn very quickly how to live on the boundary between power and catastrophe." That same evening, Leia took Ren to a hidden room of the observers, where diagrams of old gate facilities were spread across the table. She showed him the points where the White Wasteland had already struck, and the lines they might attack next. "Look here," she said. "Arc is not waging a frontal war. He is destroying the supports. If he reaches the central gate nodes, he will be able to create chain instability throughout the entire kingdom." Ren looked at the map and felt cold inside. "Then we need to stop him sooner." Leia nodded. "Yes, and for that, you need to become stronger. Not merely more powerful, more precise." "And how?" She handed him a list of lessons. "Tomorrow, you will begin training with 3 different saints to study not power in general, but methods of compensation, containment, and safe mixing." Ren blinked. 3? "Yes, do you want me to survive?" Leia smiled slightly. "If possible." Each of the 3 saints was different. The first was a master of containment, capable of strengthening the structure of a skill. The second was a veteran of rapid combat, capable of changing the form of an attack on the move. The third was a mage who worked with empty channels and redirected excess energy. Ren understood immediately. This was exactly what he needed. He had to do more than simply strengthen combinations. He had to learn how to keep the power from breaking his body and bursting outward chaotically. The first saint, a grim man with a short beard, looked at him and said, "Your gift is useful in battle only in one case, if you know what must not be mixed." That sounds paradoxical. No, it sounds like discipline. The second saint threw him a training blade. "Show me how you combine movements." Ren tried. At first badly, then better. Then for a moment, almost perfectly. The saint nodded. "There. You are beginning to see your own contours." The third saint, silent and almost severe, showed him how to discharge excess energy into a channel prepared in advance. "Without this, you will die from the speed of your own growth," he said. Ren remembered every word. It was frightening and wonderful at the same time, to learn from those who already stood on the boundary between power and the world. Several weeks later, Ren had improved. Not greatly, but noticeably. His gift no longer seemed like random chaos. He could already combine two forces reliably, sometimes three if they were compatible. He learned to recognize dangerous pairs and almost stopped making serious mistakes. And that was when the White Wasteland launched its next strike, this time against the southern district where the families of the guards lived. At night, warehouses caught fire and a white rift appeared in the center of the district, eating the magical lines out of the ground. Ren arrived there with Leia and a group of saints, and for the first time he saw that the White Wasteland had more than fighters and ideologues. They possessed monstrously powerful gate techniques. "This is no longer merely sabotage," Lauren said, looking at the rift. "This is preparation for a great opening." Ren stared into the white crack and felt as though the very structure of the district was being sucked into it. And then he understood. This was their true plan. Not merely to destroy the current world, but to rewrite its foundation so that the gates and the saints could no longer serve as its support. "I need to go inside," he said. Leia grabbed his sleeve. "Have you lost your mind? It could disrupt your gift." "It could. But if we do not stop it now, hundreds will die in the city." Lauren looked at him carefully. "Do you understand that you may not come out?" Ren nodded. "Yes, and you are still going?" He looked at the burning district, at the fleeing people, at the white rift that was already devouring the support beneath the houses. Yes, it was not heroism, not a beautiful decision. It was the first moment when he stopped asking whether he was worthy of the power and began using it in the way he believed was right. Inside the rift, everything was unlike ordinary space. White lines hung in the air like the ribs of a dead world. Here, the structure of skills was exposed, naked, dangerous, without a shell. Ren felt that he could see them almost directly, and he saw the source. A huge node resembling a heart made of light and emptiness. Dozens of smaller connections surrounded it, and among them stood a man. Arced. He stood in the center and, noticing Ren, calmly turned his head. "So you came after all. I will stop you." Arced smiled. "No, you will see that I am right." Ren did not waste words. He already knew that his enemy would not abandon his idea. That meant he had to stop the mechanism. And here, his gift proved not merely useful, but indispensable. He saw which connections could be strengthened and which needed to be broken. Which rift lines had to be stabilized to prevent collapse. Which elements could be turned into a counterweight. But to do that, he had to act faster than ever before. Arced attacked first, and this time his power was more terrifying than before. He did not merely suppress, he forced the connections between skills to fall apart. That meant any of Ren's combinations could collapse directly in his hands. Leia held the outer battle line together with the Saints. Lauren maintained the overall field, but even he was straining. "Ren!" Leia shouted. "Do not let him tear apart the rhythm." Ren clenched his teeth. He understood. If he could not hold the structure himself, then no one else's skills would help him. That meant he had to create not a combination, but a framework capable of withstanding the rupture. He assembled 3 layers: his own breathing rhythm, the stabilizing impulse of the channeling saint, and the short containment contour he had seen Lauren use. He placed all of it over himself and then over the rift. The world shuddered. Arced shouted for the first time, not from pain but from anger. "You should not be capable of this." Ren, gasping for breath, looked at him. "And I am already tired of living as though I should not be," and struck again. The rift began to close. Not immediately, not beautifully, abruptly with cracking sounds and flashes of light. At the final moment, Arct tried to transfer part of the destruction into a neighboring magical line, but Ren saw it and linked the destruction to his own stabilization, preventing it from escaping into the city. It was almost beyond his limits. His hands burned, his vision darkened, his body trembled as though after a fever. But the rift was closing. Seeing it, Leia shouted to Saint Laurent, "He is holding it." "A little longer," he replied. Arct was retreating, and for the first time, something resembling doubt flickered in his gaze instead of calmness. Ren saw it and understood. There it was. The most dangerous moment for a fanatic is when the world refuses to obey his vision. A few seconds later, the rift collapsed with a deafening sound. Arct vanished in a blinding flash, but Ren knew this was not the end. Ren regained consciousness in a treatment room. His entire body ached as though he had been beaten for several days in a row. Leia sat beside him, dozing in a chair, while Lauren stood by the wall. "You are alive," he said simply. Ren gave a weak smile. "Wonderful. It seems my survival record is improving." Leia woke up, saw him, and breathed out in relief. "Do not do that again. I make no promises." She looked at him angrily, but there was too much relief in her eyes for it to appear stern. Lauren stepped closer. "You did more than merely survive. You stopped the chain discharge. If the rift had spread, the southern district would have disappeared." Ren remained silent for a moment, then asked, "Arct?" "Escaped, but wounded. And now he understands that you are not merely an accidental bearer." That meant the hunt would become even more serious. But Ren was no longer the same. He not only knew the price of his power, he had begun to understand what it was needed for. After what happened, the Saints began treating him differently. Not as a novice, as a figure whose future fate already affected the balance of the world. One of them said directly, "If he continues to grow, he will have to be included in the circle of highest observation." Leia swore, "He is not ready for that yet." "No one is ready when their time comes," the Saint replied. Ren did not interfere, but heard everything, and he understood the most important thing. He could no longer allow himself to remain merely a witness. If the White Wasteland intended to rebuild the world, if Arct truly wanted to destroy the current system, and the Saints could not stop him alone, then Ren had only one path to continue growing. Not for status, not for glory, so that the world would have a chance not to break completely. Ren thought the hardest part was already behind him. The first gates, the first clashes, the first battle against the White Wasteland, the first fall into a rift, and the first contact with the true elite. But it was precisely when he had begun to believe that he had learned to stand on his own feet that the Saints announced an official trial, not an examination in the usual sense, but a threshold event after which you were either recognized as a potential heir to high status or forever left on the periphery of power. The trial was to take place in the Northern Bastion, an old fortress where the first guards of the gate supports had once been stationed. There, in the Hall of the Seven Vices, as it was called, because of the reliefs on its walls, each candidate had to pass through a series of combat, tactical, and structural tests. Not merely demonstrate power, but prove that they were capable of preserving themselves under the pressure of another person's strength. To Ren, it sounded almost like a joke, or a sentence. Leia, walking beside him across the stone bridge toward the bastion, was unusually silent. "Do not look like that," she finally said. "Like what?" "Like someone walking to his execution." Ren smirked. "Does this not resemble an execution?" "No, an execution is usually simpler. This is a test of whether you are worthy of remaining alive in a world that has already chosen its next war." Merrick walked behind them, carrying a field scroll containing the candidate's registration. Two more senior observers walked beside him. Their faces showed that they did not believe Ren had still not broken, and perhaps that was exactly what irritated them. When they entered the bastion, Ren felt a strange cold, not from the stone, from the presence of the old system. Everything here was saturated with the structure of trials, paths, and rejection. A place where the powerful proved not only their abilities, but also their right to be called part of the world's support. It was here that he first understood that what was about to happen would not merely be a battle. It would be the world's answer to the question, "What are you?" The hall itself was enormous, tall, almost cathedral-like. Circles of black and white stone covered the floor, crossed by thin lines resembling a diagram of opened gates. Along the walls were figures of ancient wielders of power, each bearing a different expression: pride, rage, bitterness, faith, despair, greed, determination. The reliefs did not look like decoration, more like a warning. 7 stands stood in the center of the hall. Each bore the emblem of one of the branches of power recognized within the system of the saints: containment, strike, control, reflection, compensation, rupture, and synthesis. Ren noticed the last word immediately: synthesis. It was almost insultingly obvious. 3 saints and 2 senior observers sat on a raised platform. Lauren was among them. His gaze was serious but not cold. Leia stood to his right, her arms crossed over her chest like someone who deeply disliked the entire process but had no right to cancel it. One of the senior saints stood up. Candidate Ren, bearer of hybrid combination. You have come here of your own free will and under the protection of the Observer Network. If you pass the trial, your status will be reconsidered. If you fail, you will not be expelled, but your access to advanced gate practices will be restricted. Ren swallowed. Understood. The saint nodded. Then let us begin. A training construct was released from a side passage. It was smaller than the one Ren had seen earlier at the academy, but many times more dangerous. Runic channels had been inscribed across its surface, increasing its response to any mistake made by its opponent. The construct did not attack mindlessly. It analyzed. First phase, a voice sounded from above. Maintaining structure under pressure. Do not destroy it, but endure. Ren exhaled and prepared himself. From the very first attack, it became clear that the construct knew how to strike adaptively. 2 identical movements in a row did not work. It changed its rhythm, shifted its weight, and forced him to respond too late. Ren felt the familiar cold in his chest and activated his gift, but not completely. Only partially to read the structure of the skill. He saw the algorithm. The construct was built on 3 layers. External pressure, a false opening, reverse compensation. If he simply reflected the strike, it grew stronger. If he retreated, it adjusted. If he attacked head-on, it added a new level to its response. Ren understood. He had to redirect the trajectory of the force rather than contain it entirely. He mixed Lauren's containment rhythm with his own breathing and created a thin, stabilizing contour around his right hand. The strike landed against it, and instead of breaking him, the energy moved into a side channel, weakening the center of the construct. The construct staggered. Better already, someone remarked from above. Ren did not answer. He was too focused to rejoice. He received the second strike more confidently. He redirected the third into the floor. Almost intercepted the fourth. And only then did he understand. He was not merely surviving. He was beginning to dictate the pace. When the construct was stopped, it was replaced by another figure, not a mechanism, but a magical skill simulator. A translucent projection of a swordsman appeared before Ren, whose power was based on closing distance and steadily increasing pressure. It was a dangerous style because every evasion forced the opponent to restructure the attack. Second phase, one of the saints said. Rupture. Show how you break apart another person's form without destroying your own. Ren almost snorted. Easy to say. The projection attacked, fast, sharp, with a triple shift. Ren stepped back, followed the movement with his eyes, and noticed something important. All the power was built around a predictable internal node. If that node was removed, the style would collapse. But simply removing it was not enough. He had to mix it. And then Ren took a risk. He did not copy the style. He combined it with the short constriction technique he had seen from the channeling saint and with his own acceleration. The result was a strange effect. Instead of merely avoiding the strike, he caused the projection's movement to freeze for a fraction of a second, as though the attacker had suddenly lost half of his momentum. The projection faltered. Ren used the opportunity and delivered a counterstrike that tore apart the magical framework at its assembly point. The simulation scattered into light. For the first time, a quiet murmur of approval passed through the hall. Not loud, not enthusiastic, but genuine. Ren already thought that was all, that the next part would simply be another series of tests. But when the circle of synthesis flared on the floor before him, he understood. This was the real part. This was what rose from the circle was neither a construct nor a simulation, but 4 different flows of power: cold, impact, light, and emptiness. No one tried to turn them into complete skills. They were raw forms, and Ren had to assemble them into one functioning system. You must create a usable form from incompatible parts, the saint said. This is your type of gift. Prove that you understand it more deeply than as a collection of tricks. Ren felt everything inside him turn cold. It was much more difficult than a simple battle. Here he could not hide behind reflexes. He closed his eyes, inhaled, and began listening to the flows. Cold, slowing, and compression. Impact, release, and direction. Light, revelation of structure. Emptiness, removal of the unnecessary. If combined crudely, they would create an explosion. If the correct framework was found, they would create a defense that would not collapse under the first overload. Ren chose not an attack. He chose a shell. First light, then emptiness as a filter, then cold to secure the form, then impact to determine the direction. A thin, almost transparent sphere appeared before him. It trembled, cracked, but did not collapse. Hold it, Lauren said quietly. Ren held it. Sweat ran down his temples. His hands hurt. The world narrowed to one small construct, and when the sphere finally stabilized, Ren felt not only his fingers trembling, but his breathing as well. Accepted, came the voice from above. Silence hung for a second. Then one of the observers slowly stood. The candidate demonstrated not power, but understanding. The synthesis trial is passed. Ren exhaled as though he had just held his own life in the palm of his hand. After leaving the hall, Lauren invited him into a separate room to rest. It was quiet there, with only the creaking of old boards and the faint sound of wind through the cracks in the windows. You did well, the saint said. Ren sat on the bench, still not fully believing that his legs were not giving way beneath him. Well is a strong word. I almost fell apart. Lauren smiled. Almost does not mean you did. Ren looked at him. Will I truly be considered a possible candidate for your circle now? Lauren remained silent for a moment. Not immediately. But yes, you can no longer be ignored. Those were important words, and unpleasant ones, because with them came the understanding that from that moment onward, he would no longer be able to hide in the shadows of the market, the tavern, or even the inner life of the observers. He would be seen, studied, counted. I am not sure I want that kind of attention on me, he admitted. No one does, Lauren replied. But if you want to change the world, you will have to learn how to exist beneath other people's eyes. Ren nodded. Perhaps that was the most truthful sentence spoken all day. It was precisely after the trial that Ren first noticed a strange tension among the observers. Some of them congratulated him too quickly, others too dryly. One of the senior administrators, whom he had previously considered neutral, avoided looking him in the eyes. Leia noticed it too. Something is wrong, she said that evening as they walked through the corridors of the Bastion. You mean their attitude? No, the system. Too many people became nervous after you passed? Ren frowned. Because of me? Because you showed too much. And also because, according to our information, ARCT already knows about your trial. Ren stopped. How? Leia smiled grimly. There are leaks among the observers, and someone from the upper levels is passing him information about how quickly you are growing. Ren felt cold inside. Not the White Wasteland directly, not open war, but a traitor in the very heart of the structure. That was worst of all. Because an enemy outside was a risk. An enemy inside was a broken support. Late at night, Leia and Merrick showed Ren a map of the White Wasteland's old routes. It marked destroyed towers, stopped caravans, supporting temples, and strange places where the gate lines had suddenly fallen into emptiness. One route stood out in particular. It led to an ancient complex in the eastern marshes. ARC did not appear at the trial without reason, Leia said. He wants us to follow him here. Ren looked at the map. Why there specifically? Merrick answered instead of her. Because one of the oldest nodes is located there. If the White Wasteland reaches it, they will be able to trigger a chain reaction throughout the entire network. Ren frowned. And you still want to go? Do we have an alternative? Merrick replied dryly. Ren said nothing, because he knew no. The journey to the eastern marshes began immediately. There was no time for lengthy preparations, beautiful speeches, or unnecessary planning. A small unit consisting of Ren, Leia, Merrick, and 2 senior Saint fighters set out at dawn. This time, the route passed through lands where burned villages had once stood, and old roads lay buried beneath the water. During the journey, Ren felt different, not stronger, Not more confident, but more composed. The trial had not made him invincible, but it had given him the most important thing. He now knew that he was capable of maintaining his form under pressure, and that knowledge was perhaps more valuable than victory. "You are silent," Leia noticed as she walked beside him. "Thinking? About what? About the fact that I am already too deeply involved in all of this?" Leia did not answer immediately. Then she said, "Yes." Ren smirked. "Thank you for the support." "I am not obligated to lie to you," she replied. "But if it makes you feel better, you are no longer that guy from the market. And it seems you cannot go back anyway." It sounded cruel. And liberating at the same time. The marshes greeted them with fog and rotten water. The trees here grew crookedly, as though they themselves avoided the ground, and the old stone slabs of the road protruded from the water like bones. Ren could feel that the place was saturated with ancient magic, and that magic was not kind. Something had once been sealed here, roughly, quickly, forever. "I do not like this," Merrick muttered, looking around at the fog. "Neither do I," Ren replied. In the center of the marshes, they found a half-ruined temple circle, and inside it, traces of a recent ritual. White threads, black ash, and the familiar seal of rupture. Leia crouched beside the stone. He was here. "Arced?" Ren asked. "Yes." And judging by the traces, he did not leave alone. Ren looked into the fog, and suddenly realized that he could feel something else familiar and unpleasant. The sensation of someone interfering with the very structure of space. That meant there could be a hidden entrance here. He raised his hand. "Wait." He concentrated, and the gift responded. He saw a thin, almost invisible line beneath the water, a hidden passage connected to the lower level of the temple. Not an ordinary tunnel, an old gate descent. "There," he said, "under the water." Merrick frowned. "Are you sure?" "Yes." Leia looked at him. "Then let us go." The underground complex beneath the marsh turned out not to be a temple, but something like an ancient nodal repository. Circular chambers, walls covered in runes, channels for draining energy, and a central platform on which lay the remains of an activated node, and a man in the center. Arc stood calmly as though waiting for them. "I knew you would come." Ren felt his heart begin beating faster. "You ran away from the battle again." "No," Arc replied. "I simply chose a place where the difference between our truth and yours would become obvious." Leia raised her weapon. "Enough." Arc only smiled. "You are still clinging to the Saints as though they are not the same instrument of the old system as the Observers." Ren stepped forward. "You call all of this a system while you kill people to break it." "Not to break it," Arc replied calmly. "For renewal. The world must be rebuilt, and someone must take on the dirty work." Merrick lunged forward, but Arc raised his hand, and the node flared. The floor beneath their feet trembled. Ren understood that what was about to begin would not merely be a battle. It would be a fight for the center of the ancient structure. Arc attacked first, not head-on. He forced part of the node to come alive, and chain impulses of rupture spread through the hall. Leia covered the left sector with protection, Merrick held the right line, and Ren found himself at the center of the most dangerous place. He felt space itself pressing down on him, and yet now he had a foundation. Ren began with a small combination. He strengthened his own step with a stabilizing rhythm, mixed it with a short reflection of energy, and directed it into the sideline of the node. The effect was enough to disrupt one of the rupture channels. Arc noticed, "Have you already learned not merely to mix, but to choose?" Ren did not answer. He attacked again. This time he took an impulse of light from the old node, combined it with emptiness, and compressed it into a short, reverse snap channel. The flow did not destroy the node. It returned part of the instability back into Arc's core. He staggered for the first time. "Now, this is interesting," he hissed. Seeing the opportunity, Leia threw a seal into the center while Merrick struck the side support. But Arc still held on. His power was mature, dangerous, fanatical. Ren felt that ordinary mixing was no longer enough. A more delicate solution was needed. Then he did what he had feared most until now. He mixed not only flows of power, but structures of intent as well. He took another person's rupture, his own containment, and Leia's rhythm, and created a temporary locking layer over them. Not permanent, but strong enough. The node groaned. Arct stepped back. You. Build outside the rules. And you think I am proud of that? Ren replied through clenched teeth. And yet Arct was not going to lose easily. He suddenly turned toward Leia and said, "Do you truly think he is here because of his own choice? He has been guided for a long time already." Leia tensed. "What nonsense are you talking about?" Arct smiled. "Ask your superiors why he appeared in the right documents before anyone else. Ask who first transmitted the coordinates of his rare response. Ask why there was someone among the observers who noticed him, even before official contact." Ren froze. What is he talking about? Leia turned pale for a fraction of a second. That was enough for Ren. Arct saw it and continued. "You are not merely a lucky accident, Ren. You are an element selected in advance. Someone very much wanted you to appear on this path." Something inside Ren turned cold. It felt like a blow in the back. Not because he suddenly stopped trusting Leia or the Saints, but because the world had once again revealed another layer of lies. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. Leia did not answer immediately, and that pause was more frightening than any lie. Seeing the tension, Merrick stepped forward sharply. "Now is not the time." "No," Ren said very quietly. "Now is exactly the time." He looked at Leia. "Did you know?" Leia clenched her teeth. "Not everything, but part of it?" She looked away. Ren felt a heavy, unpleasant feeling rising inside him. Not hatred, not rage. More like the pain of realizing that even those who had extended a hand to him could be hiding something. Arct laughed. "That is why your world is rotting. Everyone lies to preserve the system. At least we tell the truth." Ren turned sharply toward him. "No, you simply use the truth as a knife." Arct shrugged. "Sometimes that is enough." Ren remained silent, but a new understanding was already forming in his mind. If even his allies had not told him everything, then he would have to learn to move forward not only through faith but through his own analysis. Otherwise, he would be used again. Arct activated the core of the complex in one final attempt to break the structure. Ren saw that if he succeeded, a chain collapse would begin in the marshes, and the rupture would reach the nearest regions. He made the choice instantly. "Leia, Merrick, hold the outer line. I will seal the core." "You cannot handle it alone," Leia shouted. "And if I do not try, everyone will die." He flew into the center of the node and almost instinctively began assembling the riskiest combination of his entire life. Containment, reverse suppression, light fixation, and a short impulse of emptiness. It went against logic, against convenience, against every safe rule. And that was exactly why it could work. Arct lunged toward him, but Merrick struck him from the side, while Leia blocked the path with a protective wall. Ren was left alone with the dying core. He could feel that his body no longer wanted to obey him. His hands cramped, his head swam, but he did not stop. At the final moment, Ren did not merely seal the node, he reconfigured it into a safe, self-containing pattern. The explosion was muffled, white, and terrifying. Then everything fell silent. When Ren regained consciousness, he was lying on the cold stone near the entrance to the complex. Leia sat beside him. This time she did not look confident, only tired and slightly guilty. Merrick stood a little farther away, keeping watch. Ren slowly sat up. "Alive?" "Yes," Leia replied. "Arced?" "Gone." Ren closed his eyes. "Of course." Leia remained silent for a moment, then said, "I should have told you more." "Yes, I know." He looked at her. "Is that all?" She lowered her head. "No. But for now, that will be enough." He did not argue. Because he understood she was still an ally, but not someone he could trust unconditionally. And perhaps now he had to learn not only to combine skills, but also to combine the people around him, to understand who was hiding what and why. It was an unpleasant kind of growing up, but a necessary one. Returning to the bastion, Ren stared at the horizon for a long time. Now he knew almost for certain. The White Wasteland was not merely attacking. They were building a path toward the complete reconstruction of the world. Arced was not a mad loner, but an ideological leader with resources, influence, and access to part of the system that Ren had not yet been told about. If he wanted to protect this world, being strong would not be enough. He had to become someone capable of holding too many incompatible things within himself without falling apart. St. Laurent met him late in the evening. "You survived again," he said. Ren smiled wearily. "It is becoming a habit." Laurent nodded. "Good, because it will get worse from here." Ren looked at him. "Is that supposed to inspire me?" "No. It is supposed to prepare you." The saint paused. "The next level awaits you, and if you reach it, retreat will no longer be possible. Not as a person, not as a bearer of the gates, not as a future saint." Ren remained silent. Then he said quietly, "Then I will keep going." And for the first time, there was no doubt in those words. At night, he once again stood alone on the tower of the bastion. The lights of the camp glowed below, while far to the south, in the darkness, lay hidden the routes along which the white wasteland might be moving. Ren no longer felt like an accidentally chosen failure. He felt like a person drawn into a war for the structure of the world. Yes, he had been chosen by chance. Yes, he was afraid. Yes, there were moments when he wanted to abandon everything and return to apples, the market, and a quiet failure without great tragedies. But that was no longer possible. Now he knew the taste of power, knew the price of truth, knew that even allies might not tell him everything, and knew that if the White Wasteland won, the world would have to be born again through blood, destruction, and false justice. Ren clenched his hand and felt his gift respond inside him. Hybrid combination no longer seemed like merely a collection of possibilities. It was a tool of choice. Destroy, strengthen, stabilize, change. The world could be broken. It could be repaired. It could be rewritten. And now Ren had his own right to decide in which direction. After the expedition to the marshes, Ren began noticing what he had not seen before. Not in battle, but in faces. In pauses between words, in questions asked too cautiously, in those who agreed too quickly, and those who remained silent for too long. The gift of the gates not only revealed the structure of skills, but also unintentionally taught him to see the structure of people, where they had fear, where habit, where loyalty, and where lies. And that was how he first understood that one of the senior observers, a man named Aldrin, had long been playing a double game. Aldrin was not the most noticeable, not the loudest, not the most influential in appearance. That was exactly why they had overlooked him the first time. He worked with the archives, handled the routing of requests, authorized access to training grounds, and inspected portable seals. A person who seems too insignificant for major betrayal usually turns out to be the perfect conduit for someone else's will. Ren noticed the pattern by accident. 3 times in 1 week, Aldrin appeared near places where leaks or failures later occurred. He did nothing obvious, but his movements were too careful, and his reaction to questions was delayed by just a little, as though 2 decisions lived inside him at once, and each time he chose the one safer for his secret correspondent. "He is behaving strangely," Ren told Leia that evening as they stood by the window overlooking the inner courtyard. Leia did not answer immediately. "I noticed it too." "Why did you not tell me?" "Because I needed more than my own perspective. I needed yours." It sounded far too calm for something so serious. Ren turned toward her. "You are hiding something again?" Leia did not look away. "Yes, but not because of betrayal. Aldrin is not merely a spy. He is afraid. And when people like that begin acting, they rarely do it of their own free will." That made Ren even more wary. "So someone is pressuring him." "Most likely," Leia replied. "The question is who?" The next day, Ren requested access to the archival routes used to exchange messages between the fortress and the Southern Observer outposts. He would have been refused if not for Lauren's authority. The saint silently listened to his request and only nodded. "If you want to learn, learn properly," he said. "First find the node, then cut the thread. Not the other way around." Ren nodded, although he understood only half of what had been said. The archive looked cold and dull, but it was there that he first noticed an important detail. Several requests for data transfer were marked with the same runic sequence. It was unofficial, hidden, embedded within the formal marking. "This is an internal cipher," he muttered. "And?" Leia asked, standing beside him. Ren ran a finger across the diagram. "It is not from the observers. How do you know?" "It is built on a principle similar to what the White Wasteland uses. But it is too precise, too skillful." Leia pressed her lips together. "That means someone within the system is working with them directly." Ren looked over the lists again and saw a date that appeared 3 times, the day they first encountered Arct at the Marsh Node. He felt cold. He does not merely know about us, Ren said quietly. He receives our movements before we approve them ourselves. Leia nodded grimly. Now you understand why I did not want to tell you immediately. Ren did not answer. He was thinking about how many people might have been drawn into this network, and how many of them truly believed they were choosing the lesser evil. Lauren decided to act quickly, not openly, not loudly. He ordered an inspection of the archival channels to be prepared. Supposedly, a neighboring region required supplies to be transferred, and Aldrin was to process part of the documentation. A hidden error was deliberately left in the data, a false route to an old border fort. If Aldrin passed the route outside, it meant he was connected to the leak. If not, perhaps Ren was mistaken. It was not the most elegant method, but as Lauren remarked, elegant methods rarely expose bad people. Ren was nervous all day. He felt everything tightening inside him, not because of the danger itself, but because for the first time, he had to suspect someone not because of their power, but because of their habit of remaining unnoticed. In the evening, he, Leia, and 2 Saints hid in an observation room above the archival corridor. Through a gap in the carved panel, Ren saw Aldrin enter the room with papers, sit at the table, and begin working. At first, everything looked normal, then he stopped. Slowly, he took out a small metal pen, clearly not one of the standard writing tools, and touched the edge of the document with it. The runes on the paper flared almost imperceptibly. Ren inhaled. He is encoding the route. Leia straightened sharply. Then that settles it. But Aldrin did not manage to finish. Lauren, standing at the end of the corridor, opened the door. Enough. Aldrin froze. Then he slowly raised his eyes. There was no panic on his face, only exhaustion. And in that exhaustion, Ren unexpectedly saw the fear of a man who had lived too long waiting for exactly this moment. I can explain, Aldrin said. Then explain, Lauren replied. It turned out that Aldrin truly had been passing information, but not on his own initiative, under coercion. His sister had been captured by the White Wasteland after one of the early attacks on the southern lands. Arct did not kill her, mutilate her, or hide her without a trace. He did something worse. He made Aldrin understand that if he refused to cooperate, his sister would accidentally disappear during the next transfer of prisoners. Lauren remained silent for a long time. Why did you not report it earlier? Aldrin lowered his head. Because I knew you would isolate me. And if they realized I had stopped helping them, my sister would die immediately. Ren looked at him and felt a mixture of anger and pity. This was not the kind of traitor one could hate calmly. He was not an ideological fanatic, not a predator. He was a cornered man who had made a terrible choice because he had almost no choice left. And what did you pass to them? Ren asked. Aldrin slowly raised his gaze. Routes, inspection reports, names of those sent on external missions. Nothing about you directly at first. Ren tensed. At first? Aldrin clenched his fingers. They began taking an interest in the bearer of hybrid combination. After the marshes, after the tower, after the trial, they needed more than just you. They needed a diagram of how you keep you under control. Leia swore through clenched teeth. Lauren, by contrast, looked remarkably calm. Then we have confirmation, and now we have leverage. Aldrin turned pale. What are you going to do? Lauren looked at him heavily. Rescue your sister. But after that, you will tell us everything you know. To rescue the hostage, they had to act quickly. According to the information they had, the White Wasteland was holding prisoners in one of its temporary camps on the old border of the Northern Territories. The observers could not send an entire army there without risking another leak. Therefore, they decided to assemble a small strike team. Lauren, Leia, Merrick, Ren, and Aldrin, himself as their guide. Ren did not like trusting a man who had been passing information to the enemy only yesterday. But Lauren was unwavering. If he has not yet become our ally, he can at least show us the way, the Saint said. And if he lies, you will be the first to sense it. The unit set out at night. The journey took 2 days. First through forests where old roads were already overgrown, with roots and grass concealed the stones. Then across open fields where the wind struck their faces so strongly that it seemed as though the world itself was trying to dissuade them from continuing. Ren barely slept, constantly listening to his own gift. He kept imagining that something was being prepared ahead, not a battle, but a mechanism that was about to activate. On the second evening, they reached the valley where the camp stood. It did not look like a fortress. That was exactly what made it frightening. No walls, no towers, only tents, wooden platforms, fires, and barriers arranged so that the prisoners could not escape, and attackers could not understand the layout at first glance. The White Wasteland did not build a crude prison. They created a trap disguised as a temporary camp. "They know we may come," Leia said quietly. "Of course," Ren replied. "They know everything in advance." He looked at Alden. He stood pale and tense, as though every step toward the camp was breaking him from within. "Is your sister here?" Ren asked. "Yes," Aldrin whispered. "In the northern tent, under guard." Ren nodded. "Then we will go and get her." They entered under the cover of fog. Lorne used an old technique of dampening presence. Merrick used short distraction lines, and Ren used a hybrid mixture of silence and dispersed attention. His gift now allowed him not only to combine powers, but also to flow around another person's structure, making the unit almost imperceptible to ordinary observers. It was not perfect, but it worked. Ren felt the camp like a network. There were many weak nodes here, and all of them converged on the central tent. They were waiting for them there. "This is too obvious," he whispered. "Yes," Leia replied. "That means it is either a trap or a demonstration." "The difference? If it is a demonstration, they want us to see something. If it is a trap, they want us to die." Ren did not know which option was worse. They split up. Merrick and Leia went to the northern tent, while Ren and Loren went to the central one, where the camp coordinator was probably located. Aldrin remained on the perimeter with the task of getting his sister out if they managed to find her. The central tent turned out to be almost empty. Only a table, a map, and one man in white. Arced. Ren went cold. "I knew you would come," Arced said. Loren slowly raised his staff. "Too confident." Arced smiled. "Because I am not alone." White Wasteland fighters began emerging from the darkness. Not many, but enough. And at that moment, Ren understood. The camp was not a trap for them. The camp was a stage. Arced did not attack immediately. He clearly wanted to talk. That irritated Ren almost more than a battle would have. "You have already learned to sense supports," Arced said, looking directly at him. "And you surely think that makes you smarter than us." "Does it not?" Ren replied dryly. "No, it makes you more useful." Ren frowned. "For what?" Arced slowly walked around the table. "For the next step. The White Wasteland does not merely want to destroy the power of the Saints. We want to replace the very principle of selection. Right now, the gates decide who is worthy of power. Tomorrow it will be decided not by chance or inheritance, but by the ability to move beyond the old form. Through murder? Through liberation." Loren looked at him coldly. "You are still justifying fanaticism with philosophy." Arced smirked. "And you are still hiding rot beneath the title." Ren could no longer endure it. Enough with the riddles. "Why are you here?" Arced turned toward him. "To show you that Leia and the Saints concealed more than just the details of your selection. They concealed the history of your gift." The silence became heavier. Ren looked at Loren. What does he mean? But he understood the answer before the Saint could speak. Something tightened unpleasantly in his chest. Too many coincidences. Too many prepared routes. The appearance of the gates had been too precise. His gift had been recognized too quickly. And suddenly Ren understood. Someone truly had known about his potential power long before the first portal. Loren sighed heavily. It was almost an admission. "Not here," he said. "Right here," Arced replied. And yet the Saint began to speak. It turned out that the old chronicles already contained references to hybrid bearers, capable not only of strengthening and weakening properties, but also of drawing compatibility structures from the very background of the gates. They were not called by Ren's name, but were described as those who stitch the impossible. Such people were feared no less than the most destructive saints. And what happened to them? Ren asked. Loren fell silent. Arced answered instead. They were used. That word struck harder than any weapon. Loren clenched his teeth. Not all of them. But yes, there were attempts. And then the system decided such bearers were too dangerous. They began hiding them, isolating them, sometimes eliminating them. Ren slowly lowered his gaze. And you. Knew? I knew part of it, Loren said quietly. But not everything. Arced laughed. Do you hear that? He is still choosing the right words. Ren raised his head, and for the first time during their entire meeting, not only anxiety but cold understanding appeared in his gaze. So I was not merely found, I was guided. Lauren did not answer. And that was enough. If Arct had simply wanted to win, he would have struck immediately. But he wanted something else. He wanted to break the connection between Ren and those who accompanied him. He wanted to prove that even the Saints and the Observers built the future on control rather than truth. And that was why Leia and Merrick, who burst into the tent after rescuing the prisoners, saw not only a battle but a fracture. "Ren!" Leia shouted. He turned around. There was concern in her eyes, and within that concern was fear of losing him, not only physically but also losing his trust. "Tell me, did you know?" Ren asked quietly. "At least part of it?" Leia froze. "Yes, it was honest. And painful." "How much?" he asked. Leia clenched her fists. "Enough to understand that you were guided for a reason. Not enough to know who exactly was behind the first selection." Ren slowly exhaled. So once again, only half the truth. Leia stepped toward him. "I am not your enemy." "I know. Then do not pretend that everything is simple." He looked at her and, to everyone's surprise, calmly nodded. Because he understood, in a world where someone manipulates every important piece of knowledge, perfect trust does not exist. But that does not mean an alliance is impossible. It means an alliance must be rebuilt every day. The prisoners were found. Aldrin's sister was alive. But Arct disappeared again, leaving behind only a document and a map. The map marked an old underground route to the central temple complex, a place that even the observers preferred to avoid. Lauren looked at the map and frowned. "This is not merely a route, it is a hereditary line." "What does that mean?" Ren asked. The Saint shifted his gaze toward him. "The old chambers are located there where the connection between the gates and human will was once tested. The place where the first protocols against hybrid bearers were probably created." Ren froze. "So that is where we are going?" Lauren nodded. "Yes, because Arct wants us to come, which means the next major node will be there." Ren looked at the map and felt a cold readiness rising inside him. This was no longer a journey, not an investigation, not merely a war. It was a path to the center of the lie. He barely spoke on the way back. Aldrin walked beside his sister, unable to believe that she was alive. Leia remained silent, understanding that after everything Ren had been told, he needed time. Lauren looked as though he had aged several years in a single night. When they stopped to rest, Ren walked over to a stone embankment and stared at the stars for a long time. He could be angry, and he was angry. But stronger than the anger was another feeling, that for the first time, he was truly growing up not for someone else's benefit, but for his own. Before, he had merely survived. Now he had begun choosing whom to trust, what to verify, and what to fight for. It was painful. But perhaps that was exactly how power was born that would not break upon hearing the first truth. Leia approached him silently. "You have the right to be angry," she said. Ren did not take his eyes off the sky. "I know." And he smiled very faintly. "And I am still going to keep moving forward." Leia remained silent for a while, then replied quietly, "Then I will walk beside you." Ren looked at her. Even after everything, especially after everything. It was not forgiveness, not the end of the conflict, but that was exactly why it sounded convincing. The underground complex beneath the old temple turned out to be older than any known bastion. The stones were smooth, as though shaped not by people but by time. Lines could be seen on the walls, very similar to old diagrams of the gates, only many times more complex. Ren could feel that people here had once worked not merely with power, but with its foundation. Someone had tried to understand whether it was possible not to receive a gift from the gates, but to construct compatibility manually. "That is why the White Wasteland is so dangerous," Merrick said quietly. "They are not merely seeking power. They want to rewrite the very source of selection." In the center of the complex was a large chamber with a circular platform, and on it stood a strange pillar of dark stone covered in white cracks. Arct was already there. "Welcome," he said without turning around. Ren froze. He understood. This was already the point where words would not be enough. Arct raised his hand and the cracks on the pillar began to glow. "This is one of the first core nodes. a prehistoric form of connection. Once they tried to connect human will to the gate system so deeply here that the boundary between the gift and the bearer almost disappeared. Lauren tensed. You want to activate it? Not activate it. Liberate it. Ren felt as though his heart had tightened inside his chest. If you break it, the entire region will perish. Not the entire region, Arct replied calmly. Only the old order. Ren understood that arguing was useless. This was not a man who could be persuaded. This was a man who had long ago accepted the idea of sacrifice. And yet he tried one more time. Do you truly believe that people want to live in the world you intend to leave them after the destruction? Arct turned toward him. People do not want peace. People want not to be lied to. It was almost true. And that was exactly why it sounded so dangerous. The battle began abruptly, without warning. Lauren struck first, Merrick second, Leia third. Ren entered the battle as soon as he realized that the central pillar was connected to their movements. Any powerful impulses strengthened the cracks. That meant they did not need to strike harder. They needed to strike smarter. Ren started small. He mixed Leia's short rhythm with Lauren's containment and directed it into the sideline of the pillar. This weakened one crack. Then he added a stabilizing impulse to prevent the energy from flowing into the collapse. Seeing this, Arct smirked. You are already almost building a system. I am learning, Ren replied. No, you are already choosing. He was right. Ren understood it at that very moment. Now his gift had ceased to be a reaction to another person's power. It had become a method of making decisions. Strengthen, weaken, structure, redirect, leave unchanged. And that was exactly what made him an increasing danger to any regime. Arct struck, aiming at Ren. Lauren blocked the strike, but part of the energy passed into the pillar, and it cracked even more. Leia swore and threw a binding seal. Ren saw that the pillar would not withstand another direct attack. That meant they had to stop defending and end the battle through reconfiguration. He lunged forward, placed his hand on the surface of the stone, and mixed his own will, Lauren's containment contour, Leia's binding line, and the sharp reverse convergence of Arct's power. Then he abruptly reversed the structure. The pillar flared. The cracks collapsed shut. A low hum sounded as though the entire complex had sighed. Arct stepped back, losing his composure for the first time. Impossible. Ren stood there, breathing heavily but holding on. No, he said. You have simply believed for too long that everything has already been decided. The pillar held. The region was not destroyed. But Arct escaped again, this time seemingly less confident than before. He left behind neither victory nor defeat, but the understanding that Ren had already risen too high to be simply ignored. When everything fell silent, Lauren stared at Ren for a long time. Now you have truly stepped onto the path of the saints, he said. Ren wearily lowered himself onto a stone. That sounds as though it is a bad thing. It is both good and bad, the saint replied, because from now on you will no longer have the luxury of being an ordinary person. Ren silently nodded. Leia stepped closer and, after a brief pause, said, I still have much to explain to you. He looked at her without anger. I know. And you will not leave? Ren smirked. No, as long as someone is trying to rewrite the world, I will stay. It was his choice, his first truly mature and fully conscious one.